call the Minnetrista City Council's special meeting to order for March 17th at 5 p.m. Our single topic of conversation is water treatment. So the first item is opening remarks. Mike Funk, the city administrator.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and Council. Let's see, let's back up. So really we have from 5 to 7, so we've got really the next 2 hours dedicated to this topic. I have a few opening comments and just really kind of setting the stage for the rest of this evening.
Okay.
I have up here kind of the outline that you saw in your agenda. So I just got to, again, get some opening remarks, kind of highlight again the kind of how we got to this point here this evening. I think WSB then has some remarks by Mark in your packet, and then we do have representatives here from Bolton and Menk. Wasn't quite sure who's going to be here, but I think who's taking the lead, maybe both of you. So thank you for being here. And then also we'll do a review of the financial projections or the utilities. Hearing from a couple of the council members, what seemed to be important is understanding what impact you would have to homeowners and their yearly consumptions. And so we will share some of that information with you based on information that we've gotten from both engineering firms. So we'll talk about that here a little bit later.
Mike, before you go any further than that, though, when we come to this, I just want to say this to Brian, that we always, say that it's for the people who are connected to the water, because the general impression is it's citywide, and it's not really. So, just a little detail.
Oh, that's just specific to the users or whatever.
Right.
Yep. Yeah. Correct. Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
and that isn't totally understood. We understand.
Oh,
it, but-
okay, gotcha. Yeah, as far as when the
Yeah.
slides are up there, yes,
Yeah.
that is. It was implied or whatever. Yes, but
Implied,
yeah.
okay, well, I implied is always
Yeah.
interesting. Okay, Mike, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Okay, and certainly land is a conversation at some point we'll need to have. We have later on the agenda the SRO discussion, so certainly we need to talk about land. And then certainly we also want to leave enough room for question, answers, discussion, and then what direction you, the council, would like to go in. So with that, what I thought I'd do is just first talk about timeline. I know you, the council, have seen this before, but I'm sure we're getting a lot more of our community members interested in this topic. And so I really wanted to highlight really for our community this timeline again. I know, again, you've seen it before, but I want to just, again, highlight where we've been and what we've done to get to this point. So up on there, again, I think it's important to note really the first thing on there is in the beginning part of 2013, we had our strategic planning process. And that was a 3 to 5 year strategic plan. It took us a couple months to really shape that plan. What I would say about the plan is that infrastructure quality became really one of our 5 key strategic initiatives. And within infrastructure quality, we did a couple things. First, we defined really what that meant, and then went further to talk about key performance indicators, or KPIs. And so what we identified in our strategic plan is that we would have new facilities, either wells, treatment plants, really trying to address this issue, operational by December 31st, 2015. So I think from staff's perspective, that was certainly kind of the timeline behind a lot of what's I'm going to be talking about here in the next couple of minutes. And just really kind of honing in real quick on infrastructure quality, just wanted to read to you the definition of that. And so when we say infrastructure quality, what does that mean? And what the council and staff defined infrastructure quality was to maintain reliable street and utility infrastructure that supports community expectations and service levels. Commitment to improve potable water quality, road conditions, and surface water management. Develop future infrastructure systems needed to meet future growth. So that was kind of over-encompassing definition that we had when we said infrastructure quality. And of course, as you know, that involves streets, and there's a number of other infrastructure issues within the city that are within that over-encompassing strategic initiative. But really more specifically, again, as it relates to water quality, that was important to the city, and we identified that again back in early 2013. Since then, kind of the next action or the next time this conversation came really to the council was in June 17th, when the council received an update to the water treatment facilities feasibility study. WSB at that time had updated their plan and provided that information to the council. On July 15th of the following month, the council then authorized the pilot study. And WSB submitted a proposal, you approved that, And they spent from really July through December working on that pilot study. In December, the early part of December, that pilot study was completed, and that was then presented to the council. At that point, the council authorized WSB to proceed with design for a gravity filtration water plant. And shortly thereafter, really between probably that part of December and into January, there were some of the council members that really requested more information, more study regarding reverse osmosis systems. And again, I think there was, the council really would compliment the council in that you're looking at doing your due diligence, really wanting to make sure you're making the right choices, because as you know, this is certainly an important decision for the city. On February 3rd, then, the council reviewed the plant design options at a work session. We had some conversation at that time, and then what council directed staff to do is schedule then a special meeting for February 18th to continue those conversations. On February 18th, council reviewed those options and then approved the value engineering proposal from Bolton and Menk. And so the other important thing that happened on February 18th is then understanding that the city was going to be going through a value engineering proposal, suspending the contract with WSB regarding any of the design. When that design contract was approved in December, it was for $409,000, and WSB started doing some of that work, and then on February 18th, again, council directed that activity to, at least at this point, cease. The next slide, this kind of rolls into the next slide. February 26th through the 28th was a Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. As you know, that's when the value engineering process took place. It was facilitated by Gordon Culp, a leading expert in value engineering, and he certainly helped facilitate that process with Bolton and Menk. As you know, staff and also WSB was a part of those conversations early on, so again, providing a lot of background information. Then on March 3rd, Bolton and Menk presented a preliminary results of that value engineering study. Again, I say preliminary because it was very in an early draft form. And then what was decided is that based on when the actual full report could be completed, that we would schedule this evening, March 17th at 5 o'clock to really discuss this further. On March 10th, so really last Monday then, Bolton and Menk did provide to us the full engineering report. I want to say thank you to them for getting that to us sooner than later, so I think it gave all of us a chance to absorb it. It was over 200 pages, so it was nice having that almost a week in advance of tonight's meeting. And then tonight, we are here to review in further detail that value engineering report. We'll be hearing from Bolton and Menk again this evening. They have some presentation material to highlight for us. And then as I noted earlier in tonight's agenda, you as a council will also be hearing some remarks from WSB as well. In terms of moving forward, and really this timeline has in mind that we're looking to meet the timelines outlined in our strategic plan. And obviously this is all subject to change based on your direction and based on where you see the city going. The spring of 2014 would be that we're looking at the council selecting design. So at some point you're going to have to select which option, which design, which type of filtration plant you want, and then have that design completed and then land secured. And as you know, with the land secured, we'll talk more about that here this evening, whether it's one site, two sites, central plant, not a central plant, there's certainly land that's going to have to be secured in the very near future. In late spring 2004, late spring, early summer, provided the design is completed, there is a bidding process, and then council review those bids and authorize a contract. Construction has been estimated at 11 to 12 months. Again, that's all going to be dependent on weather and some other factors, but in a general sense, looking at construction from the summer of 2014 through the summer of 2015, and then with the new facilities being commissioned or operational by our December 31st, 2015 timeline. Kind of last slide I have, and then I'll turn it over to WSB for some comments, considerations, some things that staff would point out to you as you receive more information this evening about this facility. One is, as you saw in my staff memo and the memo provided by WSB, that they've indicated they are removing themselves from the water treatment project. So they are, they'll be commenting, I'm sure, on that here in a few minutes, but they are removing themselves from that. Which then, you as a council, then you'll need to decide, again, which design to choose, and I just alluded to that. So at some point, you need to decide the design option. And then also, you'll need to decide on a process of selecting an engineer to do that. And so there's different ways you can do that. Staff can provide some recommendations to you later, if that's your prerogative. But eventually, you're going to have to select an engineer to design, bid, and provide that construction management. Also, as I noted earlier, fiscal impacts. And so Brian has been working on the numbers, really trying to give you a sense for what the costs are, depending on various levels of debt issuance. Again, those numbers were based on the data we got from both engineering firms, not selecting whose numbers are right or wrong, but giving you at least a range of consideration, so that way depending on which option you go towards, what the impacts potentially could be. And then last, I would say it's obviously it's been a long process, and we're, I think, all working diligently to come to some level of consensus and ensuring that you have a level of information and detail that you have to make a decision. And we certainly respect the direction provided by council regarding these key policy decisions. And I've heard some comments about staff's role and council's role, and I think there is some level of, or at least want to maybe provide some level of clarity in that, not for you, council, but for those that may be listening, that council sets policy, and you know that. And so staff's been here to provide information to you so you can make those policy decisions. So as you know, this all rests with you, and we'll certainly provide assistance to help you make that the correct decision. So with that, I don't have anything else in terms of opening comments. Really at this time, we'll follow the agenda that's been outlined for you. I think Mr. Erichson has some comments to make on their behalf.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I had a pretty detailed PowerPoint presentation prepared for this meeting, but opted to really go with just highlighting a few observations of the value engineering process and really identify a few areas that we feel could be evaluated a little bit more in more detail. And I'll just kind of walk through the handout here. Just wanted to highlight a few inconsistencies in the cost estimates, not a significant matter here, but just wanted to highlight a few things that we think probably should look at a little bit closer. With the site work, WSB identified about $45,000 for each of the sites. That was raised to $85,000 for each site. With comparison to the large facility, the larger, I think you mentioned 2 to 5 acre site for the central facility, totaling about $100,000. And so I think there's some inconsistencies there. The HVAC, we identified about $45,000 each. Those were raised to $85,000 each, where the ultimate central facility, the much larger building, was only at $55,000, so less than the smaller facilities. So I just think there needs to be a little bit more review and detail associated with that. Similarly with the SCADA, each individual plant was estimated at $275,000 for each plant. That was raised to $379,000 and $387,000 for each of those plants, where the SCADA for the proposed central treatment plant was only $300,000. So I just think there needs to be a little bit further review of those documents. Interconnect costs, I think this is a really big one with regards to the success or the cost effectiveness of a central facility. And the 8-inch pipe size, we believe based on our modeling is insufficient to carry the appropriate fire protection for that north zone. We also think the costs are somewhat on the light side with regards to not having any costs with easements, restoration, tree removal. I just think that option needs to be looked at a little bit closer with regard to the alignment and the ease of acquiring easements. The timing of the proposed water treatment plant, we have not identified to occur in the next 10 years, and I'll just highlight that briefly. As you all know, we have worked on our sustainability here and recently adopted a tiered water structure to encourage water conservation. We're working to obtain an open interconnect with the city of St. Bonifacius to utilize their reserve capacity. And then also, I think most importantly, as identified in the 2011 comp plan, as well as the study, water treatment plant study in June of 2013, We identified that we would not be treating 100% of every drop of water. We talked about those peak days, summer days. We talked about the peaking wells, and those would be utilized to provide water on those peak days in the summertime where property owners are, again, irrigating heavily. Those would be utilized from wells 3, 4, and 5 that property owners are currently using today. Again, well 2A is the one with radium that would be treated at all times, but again, wells 3, 4, and 5 could potentially be utilized on those peaking days to allow that use. Again, we talk about as a community, about 60% of our water is utilized for irrigation. Savings on softener use, I guess I have just a few questions, and you might be able to clarify, because I did have a couple of questions on that, and I don't know if I heard you correctly or not, and I looked at some documents that you had in the value engineering study as well, but our calculations were significantly different than those of Bolton and Menk, and I just think that needs to be looked at a little bit closer. We did contact Culligan, who does provide a lot of those services in Hunter's Crest and throughout the city for that matter. And they indicated that a higher user uses about 10 pounds of salt per week or 520 pounds per year. Again, that equates to 13 40-pound bags annually. And then also they utilize about 50 gallons of recharge water per week. And those were pretty significantly different than what Bolton and Menk had provided, and I think that just needs to be evaluated a little further. And I might have misheard you, but I think I heard that there might be a savings of 36 bags of salt annually per home, and the recharge water use was about 240 gallons. Another important aspect of the RO would be just to evaluate the O&M. I know this was a short process, the 3-day value engineering workshop, and so I'm not being critical whatsoever. I just think there's some items that need to be evaluated a little bit further and continue to evaluate those to see, what does make the most sense for our residents here. Lastly, I just wanted to indicate that I am committed to what is best for the city of Minnetrista and its residents. This is a very complex situation here. There's certainly not one correct answer, not one wrong answer. There's many ways in which you can do this. We have a slightly different philosophy of how we propose doing this, and ours is more, I'd say, conservative and incremental. A little bit more measured approach as to opposed to building something based on projections that we don't know if will occur or not, or how far out those may occur. If the council feels comfortable with the direction it selects, or I feel the council needs to be comfortable with the direction that you select. And I think right now, from what I'm gathering, I think we're probably in a little different position, what we recommend versus what you're contemplating. And so for those reasons, I think it would be beneficial for both the city as well as WSB that we step aside from the design process with the water treatment plants. That's not to say I have less confidence in our recommendations after the value engineering study. However, I think it'll make the process a little bit less controversial than what we've been seeing to date. And I really think that you need to be comfortable with the decision you're moving forward with. Again, I don't believe there's a wrong answer here. I think there's, you could bring in potentially a third engineer and you'd have a different solution or a different recommendation, maybe a combination of the two. WSB would be pleased to participate in whatever capacity you would like in this process. We want what is best for the city, and we'll do whatever we can to achieve your goals. So I stand for any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Mark. And that finishes your presentation, Mark, is that correct?
That is correct.
And I also have Bret Weiss. Are you giving a presentation as well, or yes? No. Okay. Moving on. A presentation from Bolton and Menk. It says here Bob Brown, but I don't see Bob Brown, so.
No, we've got Seth Peterson and Chris Swanson tonight.
Okay.
Here you go, guys.
Takes two of us to fill Bob's shoes. So. I don't think Chris would fit into Bob's shoes. Happy St. Patrick's Day, everybody. Glad to see a lot of you are wearing green. I'm not Irish at all, but it's kind of fun, the holidays like that, isn't it? We just want to quickly give you a quick review and kind of go through the report. I think you all received this report. There's a couple hundred pages there. And just, we want to quickly go through it. I know you as the council probably have a lot of questions. And so we're going to go through this quickly. Interrupt us if you have questions along the way. Feel free to interject. Otherwise, you can take questions at the end also. So I think one of the key things here, just to kind of run through again what the purpose of a VE study is. And, you know, it's a team of individuals not currently involved in the project. We take a look at it. We develop and recommend ideas for you, the city, to evaluate. And we were looking at ideas that may increase the value of the project. All these ideas may not necessarily be less expensive. Some just add value to it in some sort. And we provide you these recommendations. And really, I think the key item here is these are considerations for the owner and the owner's designer. So you can take them or reject them, whatever, but it's really for you, the city, to you know, take those and move on with them. And I think that's really the key thing. It's for you to either accept, reject, or modify these. So it's solely up to the city and your designer. Just the report, these are the quick outlines of the report, and we've talked about this a little bit last time. The information phase, this was all the information that was submitted to us, the Valley Engineering team. It was reports from WSB, information from the city, presentations from the city. We took all that information in. And then we also asked for any constraints. So when we sat down, that was a 3-day, very intensive process that we went through. And we asked for any constraints. So if there's something that we should not veer into, and the constraint we received was, don't go after any of the, try and change any of the Met Council policies. And so that was something we said, okay, we'll stay away from that. One of the things we looked at right away was looking at project costs. And we compared the cost estimates. There was 2 cost estimates there. We just compared those 2, looked at them, had a contractor evaluate with us also. And our cost estimate was approximately 17% higher than the designer's cost estimate. Really, the next phase, as we took off all that information, was the speculative phase. And that's really where we sit down. We find these various areas. We had 5 areas that we really considered. And from there, we brainstormed ideas. And we had 52 ideas that we came up with. And then we take those 52 ideas, we evaluate those ideas, and we take a look at them and we rank those from 1 to 10. And then also during that process that we're looking at those ideas, we came up with some notes to designers, some things that necessarily didn't fit under one of those ideas, but was a note back to the designer and say, hey, something to consider, to take a look at, to evaluate further as you move into design. And so as we rank those items, anything from a 1 to a 10, 1 being low, 10 being very high, and those items that had a high ranking of 7 and above, we evaluated further. And so that's when we moved into the investigation phase. And that's really what you see in the back and the appendix of that report, is all the evaluation for all those items that were ranked 7 and higher. And we had 34 of those items that we did some detailed analysis with. And from those ideas, then we came up with these various recommendations. And as I mentioned before, some of these ideas add value to it. Some of them may add some costs. Some of them are less costly too. So it's a combination for you to consider.
So we thought we'd just step through the 5 areas that we looked at, provide an opportunity for the city to ask questions, ask for clarification, and go through those items for them. The first item was water sources, and we evaluated some different ideas here. First being considering the Mount Simon was the one that we thought should be considered further, how that is used by the city. I think that's fairly straightforward, and part of that was maybe some more clarity was needed in how the Mount Simon was used, but it appeared that those weren't going to be used in the future, and seeing those as a viable water source and something that's important to be used.
I'm sorry, but I really can't hear you very well, and it might be because I have an ear infection, but I don't know if people behind you can hear you or the people at home, so I wonder if you could just speak up a little bit or speak more into the,
Absolutely.
Sorry.
I've got a big booming voice, so I can certainly talk louder.
That was an insult then, I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. So we said we asked that the Mount Simon be considered as a water source beyond what maybe were the recommendations in the report, was kind of the first item.
Can I just ask one question on that? I do have a question on that. Are you proposing, I didn't see in your analysis anyway, a raw water main from wells 3 and 4, which are the ones I think you're referring to the central facility. So I don't know if you're utilizing that or not, but I didn't see those costs. Well number 5 is, I guess the other 3 wells we're utilizing. So 3 and 4 were primarily the Mount Simon ones that you're referring to, I believe.
Yeah, we took a quick look at that. We didn't take a detailed look at getting those up there. That was part of the understanding that some of the routing of this water main, and you touched on that, was, you know, we could spend weeks looking at how to route this water main. We tried to get some general distances and pull them up there. We just were saying that, based off of where the two treatment plants were gonna be located, considering utilizing the Mount Simons as part of that. And so this is where it gets a little, I don't wanna say confusing, but you know, we're doing two things. There's this idea of a central facility that we think have a lot of merit, and we've built a lot of ideas into that. There's also the idea that we wanna give ideas for, if the city prefers to go with two treatment plants, some other things to be considered as part of that as well. And so some of these play into both of those, certainly. The one thing I'd point out, and this is, I believe this was touched on in the reports also, was just the trouble with the Mount Simon wells is that they are limited by the DNR. And so as the city grows, those might be able to be more fully utilized, but right now they're limited as to how much can be used out of those by the DNR. However, they're an excellent producing aquifer, and that's why we said they should try to stay in the mix. The next item of the 5 items we looked at were system configurations. Primarily this focused on the central treatment facility versus multiple treatment facilities, and we've gone over that both during the value engineering presentation over in Chaska, at our preliminary presentation, and he's gonna touch on it here again. The one item that we hadn't touched on was SC6, and that was a preliminary look at running like rural water out to some other residents, to bring drinking water out to a number of new residents, to help build the base that the city's utilizing, and also get you know, a high quality water out to them. That looked like it could be a viable option, depending on the need of water out at these places. So that was one thing that we said that could merit additional consideration. If the city wanted to build their number of users and try to help offset some of the costs of a larger facility. Is there any questions on that one, or the central facility idea?
And now, can I just confirm that that was going to be an 8-inch pipe size?
It's 4. Were you talking to are you referring to the rural water?
No,
Oh,
I'm
okay.
talking about the central, what size pipe?
So the concept there was to run just smaller pipelines up to the north facility, because we understood that it was difficult. A raw water line to bring raw water to a central facility, and then a distribution one going up. Knowing that in the future, what we heard from the presentation was the idea that there would be some type of looping in that in the future. So that was just the initial idea, to bring
Okay.
water up there.
I guess the question I have, as long as we were talking about well 3 and 4, are there more restrictions on the Mount Simon than there are in the rest of the aquifers?
Well, the restriction on the Mount Simon is the amount of water that you can draw from it, and it's 75 gallons per capita per day. And so that's what you're limited to. So whatever you're serving with that, that's how you're limited by that. So the more population you serve with that, the more you can pump from that. So you're limited to that 75 gallons per capita per day.
What about the upper aquifer?
The other wells you are not. The other wells can, and you pump as much as you can get out of them. But the DNR with the Mount Simon, as Chris alluded to before, they do look at that and they cap you at that specific amount for the Mount Simon.
And
We can't get additional wells permitted in the Mount Simon as well.
Correct.
That's exactly what I was gonna add, Mark, too, is that you can't get additional wells, so hanging on to those wells are usually beneficial for communities in the 7-county metro.
And I know this one is, you might have to pull out your crystal ball. I don't know if Mark has one, or
Nope.
do you see anything in the future that they're gonna change that, good or bad? Have they talked, is there any talk about, with this Mount St., you know, are they gonna completely shut it off? Are they gonna let you pump more? Has there been anything said about it? Have you heard?
No, I mean, I can give you my opinion. I think some of the limitations will be extended out to all of the state of Minnesota, even further than the 7-county metro is what I see, because they're doing a lot of monitoring of that aquifer. It's a viable source for drinking water, and so they want to provide that to residents for drinking. They may limit it more on industrial use or other things that aren't related directly to consumption and that.
So they're just, right now, DNR is just limited to the 7-county metro area is all they're.
With the Mount Simon, it's just the 7-county metro area, correct?
Really?
They've shown sustained downs in the aquifer in the 7-county metro area.
Oh, so that's why they're doing it?
Yep.
Oh,
Yep.
okay.
And it's
Yeah.
a big aquifer. It starts over in central Minnesota along west of Mankato and St. Peter, and it goes all the way over to Lake Michigan. So it's a significant aquifer.
Wow.
And an excellent water producer. It's just in the metro area, they're seeing sustained drawdowns.
And if I remember right, you said you can pull 75 gallons per day per resident, or per resident or per?
Per capita. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, per resident.
Okay, and I know this is a stretch, the average household's about what, 275 a day? Or am I,
Probably, it depends on the number of users you have, and
Yeah.
I'm sure that's a good number to use. Yep.
okay, so you're not gonna pull enough water out of that one for the
It
average
depends how
household?
many people you have in that house. I mean, it all
Right.
comes back to that.
Yeah. Okay.
Excuse me, did I understand you to say that there can be no more wells in the Simon right now, the Mount Simon?
Correct. They are allowing, the DNR is allowing no more wells to be drilled into the Mount Simon. And so-
Forever and ever, or just until,
We foresee, it's been that way for quite some time. and
Okay.
We don't foresee that changing
All right.
anytime in the near
Thank you.
future.
That's
And
what
so
I thought I heard
that's,
you say.
we're just saying, we think it's important to hang on to those wells.
Sure.
They do produce the water, you can get a certain amount out of there, and it can hopefully help you delay having to drill some additional wells. Use those wells to their fullest capacity.
Great, thank you.
So under that system configuration, there's a number of items that play into that central plant idea. Part of them was being, looking at potentially hooking up to St. Bonifacius. Decoupling the plant from the towers was another thing that we touched at during the VE portion of our presentation, of the idea of then you have multiple pressure sources. You have pressure at your towers. You also have pumps at your water plant that provide pressure, and that usually provides better flow characteristics in your distribution system, which could be important for Minnetrista being the long, big spread out systems in the different areas that they deliver water to.
Can you expand a little bit on that?
The decoupling option, so, with some of the options that you had before that, WSB came up with, they had the treatment plant right next to the water tower, and that's fine. One option we looked at, because of the length, and Chris alluded to, we're trying to serve a long area here. You're not necessarily so wide, it's kind of a long area, and so you have these couple different plants where we're at. And so the issue is you want to maintain that pressure within the system, and so a water tower provides pressure. Now, if we move the treatment plant over here, farther away, the treatment plant pushes water out at the pressure for the water tower. So now you have another pressure source here that helps serve this area and keep pressure here, and you've got the tower here helping serve pressure in that area. We're just saying, separate those a little bit as much as you can, and it helps provide a more even pressure across that whole distribution system that you're serving. Whether it's, especially in this case, when you have multiple plants, you're looking at that, let's move those apart, and keep that pressure as even as possible within the system.
But you still have to run dedicated lines from the wells to the
From wherever
plants?
the wells are at, correct. You have to get that well to that treatment plant,
Okay.
absolutely. Yep, so the wells comes to the treatment plant. From the treatment plant, we pump it out, and that's giving you that extra pressure source.
Just to comment on that, I think, again, that should be evaluated a little further with regard to cost, because with those things come costs and availability of land. We certainly have an opportunity to utilize the Kings Point Tower site, in offsetting those costs. You just need to, weigh those options out. Certainly you see those cases all over the place. If you keep your eyes open and look around at water towers, oftentimes you do see their water treatment plants adjacent to them throughout the metro. You do see those all over the place.
Yeah,
So,
'cause that's been, my main concern is the cost of getting the water to this. If we did look at a central plant, is getting the water to it, and then you still have to get it back to the source, or where your distribution. So that's been a real hang-up for me, and maybe it's just because I don't understand it. I understand the cost of putting pipe in the ground. I do a little bit of it, but, we're talking a lot of pipe in the ground, and I'm assuming we're talking a lot of it would be directional bored.
I think you would look at those options, you know, and realize, we spent 2 days very intense looking at this, going with the information that we received from the city to put all this together. And so we were trying to throw out and get as many ideas out there for you guys to look at and evaluate, and to hopefully spurn some additional thoughts. Whether you take them and use them or not, that's completely up to you guys and your designer. But it's just to hopefully spurn some thought and make some improvements and maybe make the system the best you possibly can have it.
Yeah, like I said, I just wanna make sure if we do decide to look at a central plant, that cost of getting that water to it is worth.
Absolutely, yeah, and that's a big cost. We need to
Yeah.
look at that, and absolutely, those were things that we did evaluate during the entire value engineering process.
Yeah, and I just, like I say, I wanna make sure that cost is in line, cause if I remember right, it was like, what, $600,000?
Yeah, I
Or
think
maybe I
it's
missed something.
$600,000 or $700,000, that, you know, that was certainly a rough cost estimate at that
Okay.
point, was to go from point A to point B. We're working on pretty large scale maps, we didn't dive in and figure out how many roads we had to cross or that type of thing. So we took a certain portion that would just be laid normal, and a certain portion that would be directionally drilled, and do some general cost, put that together and come up with those ideas.
And was any type of right-of-ways or land acquisition, was there a figure put in there for that, or was that just strictly putting the pipe in the ground?
Putting pipe in the ground. What we'd heard was there were some routes that it was gonna be difficult to cross the lake, but there was some routes along some potential trails that could be followed during the presentation. So that's certainly, you know, I'd say beyond what the scope, the exact routing of that pipeline.
Okay, that's what I was wondering, if that was the actual cost of just putting the pipe in the ground, and that was it.
Yeah, and that central treatment plant, the idea there is certainly the life cycle costs of the treatment plant versus, you know, capital costs today, you know. Based off our initial estimates, it looks like it's fairly close in price to two separated facilities versus a central. That would have to be vetted out with some of, you know, maybe a detailed cost estimate of what the raw piping would be and distribution system piping, but it was certainly something worth considering. And then moving that forward to how long that treatment plant will last versus steel filters, it helps make it more economical for the city to consider.
And we could go with concrete filters in the smaller plants if we wanted to. I know it doesn't normally happen, but it's
Yeah.
an option.
You lose some economy of scale there.
Right.
That would drive that cost up. So certainly, from a capital cost perspective, on the smaller plants, the steel filters are a lower capital cost. Initially, I think we did look at ET1 concrete filter design versus the steel, and we think there is even potential savings in the smaller plant, but not quite as much as in the central plant.
Initially, it costs more, but the concrete filter's gonna give you a lot longer life cycle.
Correct.
And we've actually had some contractors tell us that they can do concrete for the same price.
Oh, really?
Yeah, we ran into that before. Site-specific, depending on what's happening out on the different sites, but yeah, they're closer than what you think, because you can integrate part of the filters as part of the building.
Right.
So rather than having walls, you've got filters that are the walls. So you gain some savings there.
I know you certainly haven't selected a site for the central facility, but I think you mentioned in the vicinity of well number 5. Is that correct?
We just picked that because
Right.
it was central.
Okay.
Mark, it looked like you had a future treatment plant there,
Right.
and so we just picked something that was
Yeah.
central.
And if it was in that, I guess if it's in the general vicinity of, you know, east is Mound, north is North Saunders Development, you know, so it's essentially gonna go west or south, I would think. Now, you certainly can, you know, that's something that could be certainly vetted further, but, you know, if it's west, you know, on the other side of the development where there's some open land available, you know, just a straight line between well number 1, where the water treatment plant would be, where you'd bring the raw water to and the feed line to, is exactly, actually, from where we had identified that is exactly the 12,000 feet. But it's a straight line, right through the development, right through the tip of Mound and across the lake at a diagonal, and that equated to the 2,000 feet of directional boring as well. And so I don't know if that was the case or not, but it certainly would impact the length from 12,000 to likely 18,000 feet as well. So I do think that needs to be looked at a little bit closer as well.
Sure.
Yep, and all these ideas, I'll go back to it again, highlighted in a couple of slides, we highlighted in our report. These are all ideas for you, the council, your designer, to accept, reject, modify, whatever. And they're all, we list them all here. We even list the ones up that are even no's. And part of the reason we do that is because as you continue to go through and work with your designer on these, even if it comes up as a no, it may spur in another idea for you to say, what if we did this? What if we looked at this? And that's the entire purpose of the value engineering study, is to come up with ideas, and you're gonna modify these. Some of these you might take, you might decide we don't want any of them. Well, that's completely up to you guys. So it's hopefully to generate some thought process to this.
I did have a question on the central treatment plant. You said in the report that it should be within a half a mile of well number 5. Would it be able to be farther out? Like, could it be next to our city campus? Could it be out on our campus?
That was just an assumption we made based off of some of the stuff in the reports.
Okay.
So we didn't account for more raw water main piping from well 5. We just said it was gonna be basically in the same location that was in the reports for that.
Okay.
I think it was the 3rd treatment facility that would be built. That facility could be located. Endless yeah.
Right, it certainly
Endless
could, it certainly could be
possibilities.
located here on the campus, so you'd have the available property, but then again, your raw water main and your feed lines would, you're
Cost
adding
would go
those
up, yeah.
significant costs, right?
Yeah, and it's a balancing, that's that whole balancing
Right.
thing that you take into account when you evaluate any of these scenarios.
Yeah, and that even goes back to the decoupling the water towers from the treatment plants, is you may be paying more for pipeline costs. Is that worth it to the council and to the city to get some better flow characteristics in the distribution system? I'm trying to understand those, so.
Yeah.
And I think for the people maybe watching on television, you can see as we get into the detail, the pros and cons of all these different options, the difficulty that you would have in making a decision. And so I just want everybody to realize that this is a difficult decision, and the council is really working to try to find the right fit for the city of Minnetrista.
The next item that we looked at was alternate treatment processes. And what we heard during the city's presentation was they indicated that you were looking for the safest and highest quality water. And of course, you did touch on the reverse osmosis option too, and asked us to look at that. With that, we went through a number of options to try and decrease basically the reject water coming off our road, because that's obviously a big consideration with the SAC fees and sustainability. For the most part, all these different items, to be honest, were kind of my ideas. I was like, oh yeah, we can do this. We're really gonna get the reject down, and none of them really panned out. So,
Well, some of it did pan out.
Right, no,
so it was funny. We kind of got down to the idea of doing a more traditional RO and just doing some normal things to try to increase recovery.
Right.
At a central facility. And this central facility, this is a theme that we have because it does provide an economy of scale. You talk about concrete, you get an economy of scale by going to a central treatment facility. If the council wants to do reverse osmosis, a central treatment facility provides something that one set of equipment, you get larger equipment, more cost effective to build that there. An EQ basin, one EQ basin to offset SAC charges, expandability at one location. There's a number of things that come into play for this idea.
Yeah, decrease operation and maintenance costs, you're maintaining one facility. And so there's that kind of common theme, and I think if you read through the report and see that central facility, there's a lot of those pieces that come with it. Obviously, you have to balance off getting water to there and from there, but, and I think the other piece with the central facility is if, what we saw in the report was talking about a 3rd water plant coming of another 1,000 gallons a minute, and that's really when the central water plant starts to shine, is that as you start to expand, you're expanding at one location, you can build some of that already into it, and that's really where you start to see the cost effectiveness of a central water treatment
Yeah.
facility.
And I think that was one of our goals, is we're not just designing this for 3 or 4 years. We're designing this, till 2030 minimum. And we want to understand what all those costs are, because we can't just, every couple of years say, oh, we need to do a well, or we need to do another water treatment plant, or we want to know what all the costs are for to the 2030.
The next item, the fourth item that we looked at was existing treatment plant design ideas. And these actually get a little more specific as to what we would suggest that be considered at this treatment plant. It ranges from chemical feed items to clear wells and filter design and media that's in it. And then, of course, the last one, the design capacity of it and what's considered with that, and how big a facility is going to be built, and how many facilities are going to be built. I won't bore anybody with those details, but there's some specific little things here that could be considered in the water treatment plant design that are proposed right now that we think could provide some savings or conveniences for operations moving forward. Any questions on any of those specific items?
I would like to, I'd like to make a comment. As I'm listening to this, after listening to the stuff that was presented by WSB, in my opinion, needless to say, the Cadillac of the systems would be a central location, a central plant with an RO system, being an RO system. Now, as a taxpayer, resident, or user, this is very complex and confusing. Ideally, it would be nice if somebody could tell our user that said, this is the Cadillac, this is based on using the best system, and that's gonna cost me X dollars per month more. If I go to a system that's kind of what I consider outdated, like a gravity feed system, but still is going to be useful, it's gonna cost us X amount. All these numbers and all these things we're doing here, I appreciate what you're doing, but as a user, it's very complex and confusing.
I think you've hit on a good point too, and this is an aside note just for us, is that all 5 of us are not on city water, so when we're making this decision, it's very onerous to us because we have to watch the cost, we have to watch the safety of the water, like Ann's done a ton of research and so on and so forth.
I mean, I'm listening to this and I'm just wondering,
We're still gonna hear it in the paper though,
all
that
these
none of
things,
us.
why
but
we could
that-
make it, simplify it to where we could
Right.
pass this on to the users and say,
Right.
this is the Cadillac, it's gonna cost so much. This is a
Right.
Model T or an outdated one, it's gonna cost you this much. This is a happy medium in between, it's gonna cost you this much.
Are
Right.
you
And,
going to
Simplify
give
it.
them a choice?
well, that's the thing. I gave
But
a
it's
letter.
easier to make that decision, and
Yeah.
it's easier to communicate with our residents and users. You know, I mean, I
I
see
do
things
think
like
we
I
should
read in
ask.
the paper, like if you do this, it's gonna increase our rates by 50%.
No, 200%.
Well, that, you
Double
know,
it.
how can you say that? We don't know that.
Well, but the thing is, there was a letter that Mike and I got from a guy at Consolidated Water, where they asked the users, it was a sample letter, do you want this, do you want this, do you want this? But we don't have those numbers, really.
We don't know.
We don't.
So we
And we have
can't be sitting
estimates.
here telling people that it's gonna be so much more when we don't know.
We don't know what the SAC charges are gonna be. We don't
So-
know any of
And I've
that.
had a resident contact me and say, can you tell me how much it's gonna cost if we do this, and if we do just a little bit less, but it's still safe and it's clear? and
Right,
it's
I got that same email.
Can we choose? In other words,
And I
can
think
our
we should
bill
give
be
them that
based
choice.
on which one I
Absolutely.
choose? I mean, obviously
But I
not,
think-
because you have to build it, but.
But I
Well, I
think we
mean-
have to get the numbers. We have some estimates, but we don't really have deep down numbers.
I mean, I really, really appreciate it, but I mean,
Yeah.
it's confusing. I mean, you take that resident, that user, the average user that's out there gonna do it, they're gonna go, I don't know what you're talking about. All I know is I wanna make sure my water's good. I wanna make sure there's no arsenic in my water, that it's gonna be removed. I wanna,
And it's not
I wanna
gonna take
be
all my
safe.
money.
yeah, and
so
if it's
that
only gonna
comes
cost me
into it.
$5 a month more,
Yeah,
it's a
fine.
no-brainer.
Absolutely.
And I'm gonna save salt, and I don't have to go to Jubilee and buy bottled
But
water.
I'm with Ann here, though, is who's gonna tell us for sure that it's gonna save salt, that it's gonna save money, that it's gonna, what are the numbers gonna be to build it? I mean, where are we, at what point are we certain of those items?
Brian, you gave us some numbers.
Yeah,
You
right.
sent out an email today and kind of broke it down. And it kind, to me, it looked like was the basic plant, the in between, and then.
Yeah, and that's what I tried to
land.
do based on,
Right.
the information.
Yeah, but the
and-
the base amount wasn't very, didn't have everything in it, though.
There's a
See,
lot
I
of
think you have to do it
unknowns.
for 2030, because you can't just do rates for a few years, because then you artificially look like something's lower than it really is.
Well, and I think that's something that we need to discuss to try and figure out is where we're at with this thing.
'Cause it's hard to, once you get past 5 years and then you once you even get to 10 to project, because until, I mean,
Right.
what I did was use the estimates based on, some user amounts and some, obviously, the dollar amounts that are provided by the engineering firm, and, try to annualize, and we'll get to that in a minute or two, or
Right.
maybe I'll let them
Plus, we have
finish up on-
sustainability initiatives that should help with that. I mean, there are a lot of moving parts to this,
Well, the economy.
and the
I
economy.
mean, if we were a city that was 100% built out, it'd be pretty easy to do it. We don't, nobody
Yeah.
has the crystal ball. to
Because we have
figure out
estimates for
Is
connections.
the
built
economy
in.
gonna keep slowly getting better and better? We
Yeah.
don't know that.
Right, part of the rate studies include assumptions on growth rates, and
Yep.
so you start projecting out 30 years, it's very
Well,
difficult
this
to
is
do,
only
it's hard to
15,
project 5 years, let
2030 is
alone,
15
30,
years.
so, yeah,
Yeah.
for informational purposes, that becomes challenging,
Yeah.
that's,
Right.
Yeah, no, that's what we're saying. It's very challenging.
Right, and I think this is something that I think everybody knows. This is probably by far the hardest thing that I think any of us has ever come across.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, especially because I'm not hooked to city water. So I know whatever
None of us
decision,
are.
right, I know, and that's the big thing is, this is so complicated, and, you're getting different numbers, and we've gotten options now, and we're still gonna, I know what's gonna happen, we're still gonna end up asking somebody, so what do we do? When we
In
get
the
done
end
with this,
result, how-
that's gonna be my answer.
And we
or my
can't
question.
personalize it. We can't say, well, at my house it would cost da-da-da-da, 'cause I don't have it.
I know.
No.
Or there's not a one of us, I don't believe, that are on city
No,
water
we're
right
all
now.
on
None of us are. But on the other hand, if you take a look at the cost and project out the cost, you don't wanna project out that cost for a longer length of time than what the bond is. I mean, you don't
No,
wanna buy a new truck and finance it and have it go 5 years when you're only gonna last you 3.
Yeah, no.
So you need to project that cost out based on the length of the bond, in my
I think
opinion.
it's good for us to be upfront and say, we're none of us are on it, that
Right,
people
right.
go out and say, oh, yeah, okay, this is a project, it's not.
Oh, and I
doesn't
think
have to
that's
do
why
with-
we should get, when we have a more confidence in the numbers with whatever design we end up doing, then I think we should send it out to our users and say, look, here's your options, which way do you wanna go?
I
Because
totally
they're the
agree.
ones ultimately paying
Pardon?
for it.
I totally agree.
I do too. I mean, now you got a
Let them
decision, you
have
can
some-
say, hey,
there's
I
only
wanna pay you
1,100
$5 more if I can
so
have
far,
drinking
so-
water.
Yeah,
Anyway,
Anyway.
but I don't think I don't know how we get from here to there.
well, it'll take time. I mean, even this, as much material as we have here and as fast as we've done it and satin, stuff like that, it takes time, concentrated time, which we don't do. We tend to jump off to something
Right.
else, so.
And I'm sorry, I don't care how the march is made, just tell me what time it is.
A little bit.
Sausage.
Madam Mayor,
Huh?
Yes, excuse
All
me.
right.
Mike?
Madam Mayor and Council, again, I think we all recognize the challenge that we have in
Okay.
making this decision. What I would suggest is getting through Bolton and Menk's presentation.
All right,
And then
I'm
after
very
that,
sorry.
hopefully staff can shed a little bit light on the cost. Mr.
All right.
Grimm did send
That
some
is the next
information
thing,
out.
and we do get off track. Thank you.
But no, I appreciate what you've done, don't get me wrong, I didn't mean to interrupt, but it's just like,
It's a lot of information. I think,
Yeah.
one thing that I would suggest that I've helped other communities is contact other communities that have one or the other type of treatment plants. I know a number of communities that have done that, and that helps shed light on some of the non-tangible stuff beyond costs and that help council members like you make a decision. That's hard to make, because you don't know. You're working off of estimates, you're working off of numbers. It's hard to tell at this point in a project where you need to go, and you have to make that decision. And so talking to other communities, other council members, public works directors about these type of facilities, reverse osmosis, gravity filtration can be very helpful.
Could I just ask a very simple question? I'm assuming that you've done RO plants before, and I think in your, list them and whatever. But are you the engineers, I know that you are for St. Bonnie, correct? And are you the engineers for Mound?
Yes.
Okay. Do either one of them have an RO system for their cities?
They don't have water, well, St. Bonnie has one.
Just has gravity filtration.
Okay.
Iron and manganese removal is what
Okay,
we do there.
all right. Thank you.
And Waconia has that also.
Yeah. Good to know where you are, you know. Okay, go ahead, finish. We're just interrupting.
I've lost track.
Made my point.
The last item we looked at was just backwash handling and RO reject, and some ideas on how to decrease some of the SAC fees and handle the RO reject to make it more cost effective. That was one of the ideas that the city had asked us to look at, and how to get that down. And I know Mark had indicated that they also had considered some ideas on how to decrease that. We tried to put a little pen to paper and came up with some of those ideas as to decrease those costs for those facilities.
Yeah, and do you want to emphasize that, no, it's not 100% RO, it's a blend?
Yeah.
People are very confused. I got a couple of emails going, oh, you're not going to put 100% RO
Yeah,
in my.
that's always the, an unknown for people who hear reverse osmosis, they're like, oh man, this is very corrosive. And what an RO plant does is it does blend with partially the gravity filtered water with the reverse osmosis to give you a water quality that's desired. Some communities use 75-25%. Some communities are doing 85-15. It just depends on what blend they want to get to, an 80-20 blend, depending on primary drinking water standards, nitrates, radium, other things that may be removed with the reverse osmosis, depending on the communities. The other one is hardness. How much do they want to decrease some of the salt usage and save on some of the plumbing systems on that? The other thing that you do with reverse osmosis is you adjust the chemistry. You raise the pH and you add a corrosion inhibitor. And you would do this, you add the corrosion inhibitor with a gravity filtered plant also. But these are small amounts of polyphosphate and caustic soda in order to get the water chemistry just right so that it isn't corrosive. And then we check it afterwards to make sure that it is correct.
I think if that was explained a little bit more, that might be helpful, because mostly what I've heard, is RO, and then right away they do what you talk about, it's corrosive, and it's this and that and the other thing, and I don't hear the other part, but by the way, we're gonna do this, and we could do that, and what we're really looking for is some acceptable drinking water for our city that our residents can afford, but appreciate. They're entitled to good, safe drinking water,
Absolutely.
so.
Well, to finish up, we did provide a sheet, and this is just an example sheet that the city can use to evaluate the recommendations, accept, reject, modify, and develop ideas off of. The other thing was just a summary of the recommendations regarding the central facility. And we added some numbers after it of just the items that were considered as part of that. You can see all the ones that after a central facility that kind of play into why that recommendation was kind of the highlight out of the value engineering study. The other item was the design life capacity and taking a look at that and how long the treatment plants would last and how to handle that. Maximizing the use of the water supply. Consider value-added ideas for reverse osmosis. And I don't want to be cryptic with that term value-added, because that certainly almost always means higher capital cost, but it means that there's value added from that capital cost that would decrease the life cycle costs of that, so. And then the note to designer of just considering a treatment facility for longer systems and making sure that the city and the designer understand, how long these facilities are gonna last and what's the plan with that. And I heard a couple things that Mark mentioned here earlier about what the city's counting on for conservation, and that makes perfect sense. It was just one of those that we said we'd recommend reevaluating. Finally, Seth mentioned also that there was a list of notes to designers. They really didn't fall under anything. There wasn't anything that needed to be evaluated with them, but there were things that say, hey, look at this, or did you look at this, or we saw some inconsistencies between these two documents, and for them to consider. Finally, you know, the summary, we heard the timeline of being online by the end of 2015, you know, looking at the recommendations. We don't believe that this would provide any delay in that schedule. Again, these ideas are certainly need more evaluation as we've touched on, and we're certainly willing to help answer questions on these, but more detailed analysis of some of this is needed, and it's really up to the city to modify, reject, or decide how they want to handle some of these things. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions for Chris? If not, I think we'll move on then to Brian and his fees, so we can kind of get into that a little bit. Brian, do you have a PowerPoint or anything? Or-
I have the slides that I
Okay.
sent out this afternoon, so
All right.
that's what I'll be going over,
That's fine.
explaining in a little further detail. I know in my email I tried to give the methodology behind what I did, and obviously these are all just estimates. If I was able to hit these perfectly, I probably would be, I was going to say, a national economist or something, but they don't hit too often. As far as, you know, they're just projecting just as much as I am here. So as far as is that easy enough to read on the screen, or should I try to blow it up a little more? But I'll try to with the laser pointer. Or does,
With the following slides, Brian, also, don't they break it down?
yeah, it'll get a little bigger on the following slides, but I want to just explain on the different columns here. So on the heading, this is, I know like Councilmember Vanderlinde, a couple others, and Mr. Christian's now asked, you know, what's the annual cost? You know, what do people pay based on some of these different options? So this is just the annual water usage. It's not sewer or storm surface water or, you know, recycling. This is just the cost that would be, someone would see on their utility bill. So what we have here is, I just went through our 2013 usage. In the last couple of years, we've had like about 150, 160 million that we've sold, you know, over the 1,100 units. So our connections, so, you know, I just went about, you know, 30, 60, and 90 percentiles and grabbed these user, you know, 80, 130, and 250. Obviously, this one's one that we want the conservation rates to work on and bring that down, because that's excessive, in my opinion, I think a lot of people's opinion. But then from there, what I have in each column is, each of the headings is, we've talked about, you know, the gravity filtration was about the 4.7, and that's what was the rates that we worked with Ehlers back in November. And then in order to add in the RO, we had the project cost of about roughly 8.7 million. And then this is more the hybrid, or maybe the one that's came up more recently, is whether a central facility could bring it more around like 6.5 million. So those are the column headers. From there on the side here, what I did is basically wanted to give a baseline. For 2013, what did someone that used 80,000 gallons for the year, roughly, and I just used sort of obviously it spikes during the summer, so it's like, you know, whether it's 15,000 first quarter, then 30, you know, and did just to try to get to estimate. So basically, you know, for this lower user, they would have paid about $317 in 13, then $466 for 130,000 gallons, more of a medium user, or one that probably irrigates more. And then for someone that really irrigates, they would have paid about $845. So that's the baseline there. Then what I did is took and went to 2014, and we've already adjusted the rates where this person, for if they use the same amount of water in 2014, they would now pay basically $325 based on the new rates. So then what I did is extrapolate it out, and with the help of Ehlers, what this would they would pay based on the project that would cost roughly 6.5 million, or a project that would cost about 8.7, and that's just for treatment plants. We've got some others,
And that's
Yeah.
a fixed population, so that's not growth.
No,
You're
that
not-
does factor in a growth at a projection level of, I think we used about 70 connections a year or something. We had, you know, we tried to use basically based on some of the projections. We're working with Mattamy and working with David and stuff, and we used like a 70% factor of what we thought. So basically we thought about, to be conservative or whatever. So we've got factored connections.
Okay, that's my
Yeah,
question.
I guess to your question, Councilmember Hunt. So, and then, I mean, I guess just sticking to this lower column, because maybe what I'll do is, I've got a few slides behind it that make it bigger and show each of these individual boxes so that you'll be able to see a little better. But then I went out and, what would these different properties, you know, be spending projected in 2019 on water? And you can see for basically the $4.7 million project, it would be up to about 469, 592, or 715, and that's just based on the both the additional capital costs as well as there's some additional, you know, operations and maintenance as you get into a couple of these other plants here. So I guess one thing I wanted to mention right off the bat is, to me, I think it's sort of been mentioned by a few others, is it doesn't really matter which plant, it's obviously the council or what project they want to do. The main thing that I get concerned about as the finance person is just making sure that we finance it and stick to the plan. As far as I know, we've had sometimes done pauses in our utility rates as far as adjusting them one year and then maybe taking a pause, but I think that'd be harder to do with a big capital outlay like this. So I think once we have a plan in place and decide what direction we're gonna go,
Yeah.
we just need to fund, because I know I live over in the city of Mayor, and they have to, it's a little different situation, everyone's connected, but they end up subsidizing some of their water and sewer through their tax levy, and I think it'd probably be a little harder here with not everyone on the water system. So I think we need to, whatever we choose to do, you know, we just have to make sure people know that the rates, and if they want to use a lot of water, they're gonna have to pay, I guess, so. So otherwise, yeah, I'm gonna just jump ahead to, so you can see.
Well, the only problem, I kind of have a problem with the $4.7 million one when you get down to the 2019 projected.
Okay.
Because it sounds like we're gonna have to invest more, it won't be 4.7. So it's not really apples to apples. You kind of lost it there because you probably need a new plant by then.
And I was just working on the
Yeah,
the
but that's what
information
I'm
that was
saying
right,
is,
but-
I'm saying you have to, that's why these are, I mean, I think this is a good exercise because it kind of gives you an idea. But I think that once you hit 2019, a lot of those numbers
Yeah.
are meaningless because I'm not convinced that 4.7 million is the correct cost on the bottom anyway.
Okay, yeah. So this was more just for purposes of being
Yeah,
able
no,
to
no.
compare.
And I think it's a good exercise to go through, but it's certainly not something we should be running around publishing because it's an estimate.
Oh, yeah, I wouldn't say, just with our financial management plan, I think sometimes we've been held to too strict of guidelines as far as, you said, you know, that
Yeah.
in the year 2019.
That's why I'm,
this
that's
would
why
be
I'm
the
saying
tax
these
levy.
caveats.
Yeah, I don't think you can.
Saying, you guys, you have to look at this is just like, you know,
No, I mean, they're all
a
just.
speck in time.
Yeah, because each year you have to see if more connections came
Yeah.
in than what you projected. So yeah, every year we analyze this just like we do with
Right,
our
right.
financial management plans. So yeah, no, I think to your point, I'd 100% agree with you that, yeah, if people try to say, well, you said that this is what the cost was going
Yeah,
to be.
I mean, if this ends up in the paper next week, I'll have a problem with that because it is just a snapshot in time. It's not, you know, there's a lot of factors that go into it. It's just an exercise so you can see how things
Yeah.
go.
And the one thing I was going to say.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say that the one thing that I was gonna mention, and I mentioned it in the email to the council, is this is just, what I wanted to show is what was gonna be on people's utility bills, because obviously the savings that from the water softener stuff, I know was mentioned earlier
Yeah.
from both Bolton and Menk and WSB, and I put in the email, I think the range could be $135,000 a year, could be
Again, it's-
$235 a year, so this
Yeah.
is more just showing what the gross amount on the utility bill would be, because
Right, not
obviously.
taking that into consideration.
Correct, yeah,
Right,
so.
right.
Oh,
Yeah.
No, again, I appreciate the comments from council. Again, I think as what Brian has explained is, and what Mr. Christian's brought up a few minutes ago is, you know, what can users expect? And I think that's the ultimate question that you're trying to answer is what are the decisions you make and how does that impact residents? And certainly these are all estimates, because we don't have hard numbers. So at this time for the financial analysis, the best that Mr. Grimm can do and our financial analysis can do is based on the estimates provided to us by the engineering staff. And we use both engineering firms and numbers.
Right,
So
but
we're
they're
not-
very preliminary. They could go either way.
Well, yeah, until we have firmer numbers, we don't, this is, I think, our best guess estimate as to the financial projections at least going out the next 5 years. And it makes it even harder to go out even to 2025 or 2030, based on, again, a set of assumptions. And so what we tried to do, again, is look at, you know, on the low end, the 4.7. Again, you're right, Councilmember Hunt, that's based on today's information, that doesn't take into consideration another plant coming online, regulations change, and you have to have an expansion. That is absolutely correct.
Right.
At the same time, we also wanted, again, give you this is really to give you a sense of where rates
Right.
go, given.
No,
some of
I
these
think it's a valid
assumptions.
exercise.
So-
I just am putting some caveats in there so people don't think this is
Yep.
it. This is the great number.
Right,
That is correct.
and I think that's what we need, and hopefully our press realizes that these are just estimates, that, you know, if you want to put this in the paper, I don't have a problem with it, but make sure that you understand that people know that these are just estimates. You know, that's what I would ask of our press, is to make sure that all the information gets in there.
Well, you know, Mark, if you do that, the issue, like Mike just pointed out, is, and Brian, I mean, there's so many factors that are not entered in. I mean, there, you know, like, if you look at this and said, oh my God, it's gonna be so much, but now I'm thinking, okay, I don't no longer have to buy bottled water, I don't have salt, I don't have maintenance issues on my water softener. I mean, so it's better not to provide any information until you have more accurate information.
Right, but we have already. It's
Yeah.
on camera.
Right.
So people are watching, and they're gonna
Yes.
watch
Yeah.
this. And that's why I say, that's why I want to make sure that everybody understands that there's more to these numbers
Right.
than what are just here. You know, these are not probably gonna be the exact numbers. It's a good place to start, and I applaud you, Brian, for doing this.
Yeah, I think it's a
because,
valid exercise.
And I think our paper understands that as we're talking about it here and stuff like that. They still do have freedom of the press though.
Well, I know, but I asked that politely, if we can
I
make
know you
sure.
Just trying to put
did.
it in
Everybody
context.
asks politely,
Right,
but.
I mean, we're trying to do a good thing here. We're not trying to get residents upset. We're trying to, and it's kind of been that way a little bit. We've got a lot of people that are.
I had a
you know,
developer say, oh, you mean the rates are gonna double? I'm like, well,
Yeah.
nothing's been decided yet, and we don't have any numbers, but,
They're all hypothetical,
yeah.
so we're all guessing at this point. We don't have actual figures,
Well,
and people should know that.
Well, we better start looking though.
that's.
Well, I
yeah.
agree.
Because they're
We're doing.
expecting it in a year,
Right.
so.
I think that's what we're doing. That's why this has been such a long process.
And I think what Mr. Grimm and what staff has pointed out here is, as we're working through this exercise with you, is, again, whether you do RO or gravity filtration, I mean, that's really not the exercise here with this, is just to understand, if we do an RO and the 80-20 blend, what's been, the numbers provided to us is more on this side of the cost estimate. And I think what it illustrates here is if you go to that 80-20 blend, and based on some of the numbers provided, you know, what does that mean for a homeowner? This is a low user, so keep in mind, this is a low user, that their rates could go up, again, $350, $357 a year.
That's.
I'm sorry.
That's from 2014 to
2014, I'm
2019.
sorry.
Just to try to show what the rate
Correct, I'm
potentially
sorry,
would be
I
in
said that wrong.
2019
It's only 5
versus.
years that we're already.
So it
working,
phases in, the way you do it is you'd phase it in, that's how we've
Yeah.
structured with Elders, but yeah, basically, and I can walk through it
Yeah, I
too,
think you should
but-
go to the next couple of slides, because of the tiered rate system, it has bigger impacts for some of the
Okay.
higher users.
Well, that's the point to tiered.
Yeah,
Right.
Adjust behavior, basically, yeah. So, but what I'll do is, I'll go over, I added a couple columns and took each one individually, so it'd be easier to see, but if we go down, basically what this number is just taking the 2014 rate less the projected 2019 rate, just to show what the difference would be and what they're actually paying in because we wanted to try to go out several years out, you know, we're not going out 10 or 15, but at least we're going 5, 6 to just be able to show, and obviously incrementally it would change, like, you know, 2015 would be about 350 and, you know, and so on and so forth, so that's that number there, and then just, obviously the bottom's just the percent change, which, you know, I don't know, obviously, when you have numbers that aren't that small, you know, a small number to a smaller number, you know, but you can see that, you know, if you look at just the percent, it is
Yeah.
a big jump, and that's, if you take that over 5, 6 years, that is, you know, I mean, 8 to 10%.
250% over 5 years.
So, but no, that's, yeah,
Use that.
those are each individual columns or individual options, so yeah, those aren't, you don't add those
But
together.
people also have to understand there are wells in there's, you know, piping, it's not just the water treatment.
Correct, yeah, because the actual total CIP or capital
Yeah.
improvements, I mean, here is probably about 8 million, 10 million, 12 million. This is just focusing on just the water treatment, just to
Right.
give that example, so. And then the columns over here are more just showing the incremental difference between the high range and the low range, as far as, you can see for 2014, it would be about $32 or 10%, you know, higher to do this project over the other one. And then when you get up to 2019, that ramps up obviously to closer to about, you know, 246 there or whatever, and then what percent that is, and obviously that's, again, over, you know, a certain amount of time that inflates or whatever there, so. And the next two slides just illustrate, obviously, the dollars, you know, change a little bit. You know, here you're talking about going from 523 to 754, so, you know, that would be about, you know, the way it was structured is the percentages stay about the same, but obviously the dollar amounts, the more you use, the more it goes up. So, you can see there some of the differences. It goes from, you know, 231 to 574, and then over here, 52 to 395, and then obviously, this is the extreme case here, but you can see if someone really wants to irrigate that much, you can see the dollar amounts get pretty high, and at some point, depending on what their disposable income is, maybe they change their habits, or maybe not. Maybe
Well, we
it's
want that.
it's all relative, I guess, to some people. So, but yeah, I just wanted to walk through those and add in those columns with the dollar and the percentage changes, just to sort of give some, obviously, based on estimates, just some information I know as far as, sometimes it's hard when you see it on a quarterly bill or whatever, or on that perspective to see what it's gonna be, but I guess this way you can compare it to, you know, these property owners also, you know, they pay their city taxes, and obviously probably, I'd say the people more on this end are, I don't wanna stereotype, but they're probably in the higher valued homes, so it's all, I guess, relative, as far as that, so. I don't know if anyone has any questions or wants, but yeah, basically the first slide shows more of a, you know, summary, and then it breaks it down with the individual ones.
So basically, you're looking at about a 10% increase, at least for the next 5 years.
Correct, yeah, and that's basically how we tried to structure it versus doing like a jump, you know, 20 and, you know, and then phasing it down or something. It's just basically, yeah, that 10% increase.
And the difference between doing what I would call the basic model to the upper end is, at this point, is about
It's almost
$3 a month, roughly $275 a month. I think it was, what, 30 some dollars a year.
For the one that uses about, yeah, is this what you're looking at? Yeah, as far as, yeah, for 2014, yeah, if this project cost was done, it would be at 325, and if the high end, it would be the 358. So yeah, for 14, but then, you know, by the time you get out to 2019, it gets to be
Yeah, so
the bigger
you're looking
spread.
at the Cadillac of a system for $3 a month, right? Is that, do I read that right?
In the first year, and then
The
it,
first year.
and then it
You're
ramps.
looking at about $3 a month
Right.
Yeah,
And then it goes,
to have the Cadillac.
yeah. By 2019,
For the
it was
first year, but by the fifth year, it's more like
246, right? That's about
right, what would that be?
24.
But, yeah, about 20 bucks a month, give or
About
take.
$20
yeah.
a month. Okay, that's good to know. That way, that's information
Yeah.
that the residents need to know, is it's not gonna,
Yeah, and this is based, obviously, yeah, I mean, we made the assumptions based on, to Councilmember Donahue's point, once it actually gets built, and you see
Right.
how it comes in budget to actual, that's when you actually would set those rates pretty hard and fast, or whatever, you know.
You might not be able to do option 3 for 8.7 million.
Once, yeah, I guess once
Right.
you've been inspected out or
Right,
whatever.
Right, so, I mean, but I think these are numbers that, I think WSB has given us, Bolton Menk is kind of the range where we're gonna be in. You know, we have to have something to start with.
But at least this gives a ballpark as far as,
Yeah.
yeah, when you start saying percentages, a lot of times, like, I mean, really, yeah, that 99%, it's like, what does that mean? Well, I guess it's $357, you know, over from 2014 to 2019 there, or whatever, so.
Right.
So even if you said $30 a month, 5 years from now, $30 a month, and you look at that and you say, if you went with that system, the Cadillac, oh, I no longer have to buy bottled water, I no longer have to buy salt, I no longer install a water softener.
Yeah, some of those would be,
I
yeah,
mean, this is,
yeah,
those
'cause
are
this-
huge issues. Now $30 a month sounds like a lot of money, But if I'm not spending X dollars to put in the softener and spending X dollars a month for salt and.
Yeah, depending
I
on how
have to
each
go to
individual.
Jubilee to buy my water. Sorry, Jubilee.
Yeah.
Dollar a day.
The only thing, I think the systems that we've been kind of looking at, you still are gonna need a softener to somewhat.
Yeah,
It
although,
depends on
however,
how much we decide to soften.
there will be a savings there on this.
Right, but then that cost.
But even if
goes
you
up
dial
too.
it down, there's a
Yeah.
savings.
Right, if
I
you,
mean, so,
right, so.
now you're not talking, you're talking, you know, so when you put that all in perspective,
Because that was one thing.
Sign me up.
I know was in here that chances are, I think even at 50-50, there's some people are gonna still want softeners.
Mhm.
You know, I just don't want people to get the impression that they're gonna be able to throw their softener away.
well, as Cheryl said earlier
Some people
too, it's
will.
our
Well, it depends on how
obligation and
soft you want the water.
responsibility to give good
Mhm.
drinking water to our
Yeah.
residents.
Yeah.
It's not all murky.
Yeah, and I think that's the base. We have to start there.
Start somewhere, yeah.
And then figure out, do the residents want the extra?
And those that do, maybe they can sign up after we made our initial investments.
The problem is we either do it for everybody or nobody, because it's a system-wide. If you're gonna do RO, everybody's gonna get RO. You know what I'm
Not
saying?
everybody, just 1,100 people that have city water.
Well, right,
That's the
anybody
rest
that's
are
on
not.
city water is gonna, they're either gonna have RO or not, nothing in between, so.
Although I did have a
Well, it might be
resident on the well
blended.
that said if we go RO, she wants on,
Who does?
a resident, I said.
Well, yeah, I think there are people that do believe that,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
too, but I think as they were talking just a little while ago too, about blending, and there's nothing wrong with that either if it's okay. It works for our
See, a
residents.
question has come up also about, you know, if you want good drinking water like you're gonna buy at the store, why don't you just go invest in an RO system and put it in your home?
Yes, and put it in your home
However,
like I do.
Like you've done, now yours is
We've
different
done.
than mine. Okay, your system's a little different than mine, Cheryl, because
Well, I've
mine's
had
a
two.
big system.
Yeah, well, sure.
It's a fairly sizable system, but in either case,
Mhm.
the average person doesn't realize the maintenance required on it. I mean.
No, probably not.
And the wasted water.
And the wasted water. There's additional wasted water and there's also a maintenance system. So if you, for example, and most people are not gonna know that they should change that filter about every 3 months or so.
If they don't, they're gonna know it pretty soon.
You know, so I
Or
mean,
get sick.
if you have it with the city, you know, that's something that's expected that we're gonna take care of and we have to maintain. But, you know, so there's some,
Mhm.
for
We'll have to give-
residents,
we'll need to
it's
give
not
classes.
quite that simple of just go
Right.
buy one. Because now
No,
you
you
got
can't just toss
cost of
everything and
filters and
everything is
maintenance of it.
perfect. Okay, where are we now?
I don't know, is there any other questions or that anyone has on this? We wanted to at least quantify, and I think hopefully this makes it easier to see what the actual cost would be. And obviously, it's just like your taxes and, the valuation, everyone has a different valuation, everyone uses a different amount of water, so you can, if someone uses 60,000, ratchet those numbers down a little bit. If someone uses, 150, go between those two, so there's just, a lot of different, options, but at least we gave a few different examples here that hopefully helps in the decision-making process, or at least more information, so.
You don't know how this compares to other cities, do you?
I know that when we had our water study back in November, that was based on this column here, or 4.7, or I guess on any of them. And I think based on with our capital coming along, I think we were gonna be like in the middle high maybe based on that. So I'd have to double check, but I think we were in the middle. So obviously with the more capital you do, it maybe would bump us up a little bit, obviously, or somewhat, or proportionally, but then some cities, I think I mentioned earlier, they use their tax levy to subsidize, the rates, so it's not always apples to apples either, so.
Yeah.
Because when we did that study, did we look at strictly cities that had a water treatment facility? I mean, that, you can see that really can send the numbers out of whack.
Can, yeah.
you know.
I know we use as comparables all our neighbors for the most, so yes, they're not probably.
None of them
all-
are treating except St. Bonnie, right?
I think I had Mayor on there and they're
Victoria
treating
does.
in St. Bonnie.
Oh, Victoria does.
In Waconia, I think we had on there and they treat, right? So I think it was almost like a half and half, I think.
Okay.
We can take a look at that again as to, normally when we've done these rate studies, it just really compares ourselves to our neighbors, but we can revisit that and break out specifically which cities have water treatment.
Yeah.
It gives you a better comparison as to where our rates are going compared to the other cities that have it.
Right, and granted, we are challenged because we're not this box, this one
Right.
is
We're
for a
obviously
mile.
gonna be more than the same. box.
Right, we've got these long lines that are going out. It's more to maintain, it's more to put in, so I'm sure most people are gonna understand that we're not,
We're
at this
like on
point.
Medina.
Right, someday we'll be, what I would call a normal city where it's pretty, well, whatever you wanna call it, but just, it's totally built out.
Yeah.
And at this point, we're just growing, we're just sending out our,
With growing pains.
yes, yeah, so it's, knowing that, it's gonna be more expensive up front, I think.
That's true.
Okay, any more questions? If not, the next item on the agenda is land. Are we talking about that at this session or not?
Maybe, just seeing where the conversation's going, I think we probably should also talk about it.
Okay,
Maybe
okay.
before talking about land, to help answer the land question, probably is more a question about what this really all means for the city. And again, so you're getting a lot of information again this evening, council, which is good, because it's as we've mentioned, a complex project, a lot of moving parts involved with this project. So knowing where we're at, I think at least what I'm hearing, and correct me if I'm wrong, is, how do we get at determining these costs more definitively? What you've done to this point is you've done a feasibility study, Bolton and Menk's done that, so you have some detailed costs from Bolton and Menk, and that's what feasibility studies do. So you do have some level of detail with the feasibility study already performed. Based on what Bolton and Menk is suggesting, what we do is have a range of costs, and there's assumptions built into that. And I think correct me if I'm wrong, I think one of the things that Bolton and Menk is suggesting through the DE process is, it's a limited amount of time they have. It's the 3 days that they spent on it. And so to get more definitive costs, it needs further exploration. And I assume the further exploration would mean for you, council, is really taking a further step back at this and authorizing likely another feasibility study that really hones in on the options that you want to further explore. And so it's likely going to take some more engineering analysis to be performed by someone to give us some of those further defined costs regarding the central facility regarding RO and some of the other options that they've recommended. So I think that's the consideration for the council, is really to go to the next step of this and to further give you better, more detailed information, is having an engineer explore some of these options that have been laid out for you. Without doing that, what you have is these estimates. So I think what you need, probably one of the things you need to contemplate, council, is to what extent do you want to continue to explore these options? And to do that would likely require an engineer to help you with that. There are ways to select an engineer, and one of the suggestions for you to consider is doing an RFP. And so that could be structured in a way where you write a request for proposals seeking engineering help, assistance, to hone in on the options that you want to further pursue. And that way you can get some more detailed analysis about central systems, piping, land, operation and maintenance costs, if that's the level of detail you're looking for. If you're okay with just the numbers here this evening, and you have a range of numbers, then it's really have to decide, what is that next step? And at some point, you're gonna have to, again, decide design. So the conversation I would suggest that you probably wanna have is, to what extent are you comfortable with the numbers? Is there a design that you want to look at, that you're leaning towards? And looking at an engineer to help you with that process. So I just threw a lot at you.
Is there another option of doing a kind of a design build, looking for proposals from engineering companies to bring back
There are, I guess I would defer to both our city engineer and maybe even Bolton and Menk to answer that question. I'm not as familiar with design build RFPs, and maybe also defer to the attorney as well, about design build. I assume you'd want to, in that process, you need to tell them what you want to design.
Yeah,
Right? Otherwise, you're gonna have proposals all over the
Right.
board, and so you need to be probably specific to an engineering firm about what you want designed, so then they can give you that type of proposal. That is an option, you're correct. But I think for the council, you need to give some parameters in which you want them to operate.
Just another suggestion I have, and I think you're all struggling with, and Administrator Funk talked about it, saying you need to kind of develop a scope, and get to that point. The other option you have is if you're not comfortable and you don't quite know where you're going, but you want to go out and look for something, you can just do a statement of qualifications. And that's where you just look and get a statement of qualifications, and you say, hey, we want to evaluate the feasibility study, you might turn into this. It's another way to go where you could say, well, we'll select a consultant based on the statement of qualifications, and then from there, figure out how you want to go with it. That would allow you then to develop that scope as you continue to go on. If you're comfortable enough with the scope and you can develop a scope, by all means, go with it that way. But that's another suggestion. That is a possibility.
So how does the statement of qualifications work?
Excuse me?
How does it work? I mean, what do you?
It's just like an RFQ, except for a statement of qualifications, you don't have a defined scope. You're kind of you're more generalistic, saying we want to consider this for our water system. We're looking at it, and you're really looking at the qualifications of the terms that you requested those proposals from. And it doesn't get down to a specific number. It's you're looking at the qualifications of the firm.
Usually, how long does that take to do?
It's the simple, you would put out a statement of RFP for an SOQ. Is that enough there? Request for proposal for a statement of qualifications, and then you can send it to the MPCA and the MDH and the MDOT. No, I'm just joking.
Would we eventually have numbers?
So it would give you a way to at least select a firm if you wanted to go that way. And you can do that relatively quickly, turn those things around.
And if you go through that process, and correct me if my misunderstanding is wrong with SOQs, is the step after that is once you get an SOQ, that helps you define the scope. And so it's another option. I don't know that it necessarily speeds anything up. Again, I'd want further comment from the engineers that have done this, because we haven't done it here for a very long time.
Mr. Members, I was just going to address the design-build question. Design-build is used for these types of facilities. I think that, you could do it both ways, but the challenge with this is we've talked about that it's so complicated with the long runs and without knowing where the treatment plant would be located. So you probably have to go a little bit further with that, but you could do a design-build process, and then you get some idea of locked in what the cost is before you're moving forward, and then they design it. It does speed up the process a little bit. So it may be that you want to do this initial step to look at and try to refine, okay, what is it that we think that we want to do? And then, but you still have to have 30% plans done typically for design build so that it gives them some good idea of where you're going to go. But because the process has been slowed a little bit through this area, if you still wanted to hit that date, it may be something that you want to consider down the road, because they can design the facility as you're building the facility too, which is the advantage. Doesn't always result in a cheaper cost though, because you're shortening that overall time frame. As far as the RFP process or something that if you go through, I think you've got the value engineering study, you've got the feasibility report, so it would be pretty easy for somebody to put a price together to evaluate that, to say, here's what we think we could do that for, to evaluate the information. So you've got it all here, and so I think you could in a fairly short time frame, ask an engineer to respond to an RFP for that, and they could give you, if you said, we want to take it through the feasibility report stage, we just want to evaluate these, make sure that you do a good cost estimate, know what these, if it's 2 plants, central plant, and then adding RO to both of those, pretty straightforward. And you've got a lot of information in the value engineering, you've got a lot of information that we've done on the feasibility report. So I think it's pretty straightforward for you to go ahead and, instead of doing a statement of qualifications, if you wanted to lock in your cost and know, I think that's something that an engineer could turn around pretty quickly with all the information that's already been presented. So.
Okay, let's do that.
We can do that.
So we'll
Just request a design build.
a design build to look at 2 systems, 1 system, with RO, without RO.
Yeah, let's I agree. I think one of the issues that we have, if we continue on doing, we're not gonna have any money left with all the engineering fees, for Christ's sake.
Cut on to that, huh?
All the whole taxpayers' money and all the people that are gonna use it are gonna end up in your pocket. We can't
We're
have
not gonna have
that.
any water
I-
either.
You know, I'm sorry, not design build yet, though, just the
Right.
feasibility report to evaluate the cost, then you can plug them in, and then if you want to go design build or what we call design bid build, you can do that after that feasibility report. But that feasibility report will lock in those costs and tell you, okay, you know, because I think, we're pretty confident in the numbers we're very confident in the numbers that we have on this part of it, and I think there is, there's some additional costs associated with the central plant that Mark had identified that are pretty significant and could delay the time frame of this because of trying to get easements through properties. That's always the unknown. You don't know where those are gonna go, and I think these guys would attest to that anytime you involve buying land from people, it extends the time frame. So those things you have to take into account. But get the feasibility report done. They can do that, I think, rather quickly, and we're certainly happy to help you in any way with that, since that's part of the reason that we've decided that it probably makes more sense for us to step back from this process, hopefully be able to help guide you with no conflict of interest going forward, and help you get all that information pulled together so you can make a good decision. So anything that you need, we're here to help.
I agree, I think we spent enough money, I mean, we spend a great deal of money on engineering fees and so forth, and studies and pilot studies and all the things that are involved in this. Let's take it to the next step.
All right, let's
I
have a
agree.
motion then.
Go for it. You
No,
did.
you make the motion.
They pointed at each other.
Well, I guess
I mean, we have to
make a
give some
motion.
direction to staff to get them started. We can't, just
Well,
wait,
the
so.
direction to go is to, but there's something I missed that has to be before it, but I wanna see them go right to a design build for a central location.
You missed something.
So you
though.
don't want the feasibility report that outlines the cost?
Yes,
Then you go out
And
for
then
Go
a
ahead.
design
We do
build.
that first, and
and
then,
then the
Then you go
design
to
build.
RFP
So
or
go
design
ahead.
build.
Yeah, and just to clarify, again, I think what's being suggested here is that to get to that phase, I think we're all anxious to
Yes.
get past the engineering phase if we can, and look at something more definitive. And I think what you're hearing though is to get there, we still need to spend some level of dollars to get a better scope of services. And so you would do that through, what's being suggested here is staff would draft an RFP. So I think the motion is to the effect, staff would draft an RFP. And that RFP we'd be soliciting engineering firms to help us with the feasibility report, to give us a real idea of the costs. And once we have that idea,
Cost, yes, exactly.
once we have that, once we know the more definitive cost, that will probably help you then in deciding which route to go. And then you can decide to do the design, build, construction type option. But we need
And
to,
between the feasibility report and the design build, that's when we should send the letter out to the residents and ask the users, ask them what they think.
right, once we get the feasibility study back, then we're
Yeah,
gonna have
then we
some,
should do that.
we're gonna have a
Then we
little
should do the
closer
design build.
numbers,
Mhm.
right, and then get the question is, what do you
Yeah.
want?
Yeah, and then go from there.
Does that
Is
make
that your
sense?
motion?
yes, it does.
Yeah, I'll make a motion to put together an RFP for a feasibility report to look at two plants as opposed to one central plant, gravity in both and RO in both. And,
Well, what happened to the
Wait a minute.
request for quotes to get the costs? I mean, we
well,
wanna-
that's what, but that's what they're getting the costs on.
Okay, I just want to be clear about that. I don't want to come
Yeah.
back with another.
No,
You
no,
lost
no.
me, Ann. I'm sorry.
Okay,
Well,
We're
Mike
making-
made the motion, so if we sort of copied it, we.
We're looking at the motion though, to look
Okay.
at the central
we're
one
gonna
plant.
compare it all.
Okay, so what you're asking for and what the motion you're making is for a central plant for
And-
comparison.
Yeah, compare the two plant idea with, or three plant idea, depending, and we should do it for 2030. We want to have it so that it lasts till 2030, what those costs are. I don't want it for 5 years, I want it till 2030. You know, if there's gonna be additional wells, or if there's gonna be additional water treatment plants. So, compare two plants to a central, or three plants to a central, compare gravity and RO at both, give us the costs, then we can give those costs to our residents. Our residents can vote how they want, what they want to pay for. Then that will determine what our design build RFP is.
Can you do it for that length of time, though? Can you do something out 30 years if you're only gonna have a 15-year
15, it's only 15 years.
Oh, 15?
It's only 15
Okay.
years. 2030
Yeah.
is 15
And
years.
are you
Oh,
adding
I'm sorry,
blending
I
in
thought you
there
said
too,
30
so-
years.
No, 2030.
Okay.
15 years
15 years. of the
from when
rental
it's
value.
built.
So basically, they're both gonna be gravity systems, the basic plant. They'd be-
Right.
Yes.
So we want to see those costs, plus we want to see the cost of adding a row.
Yep.
And then to the 2030 timeframe. And then we'll take those numbers, we'll send out a letter to our residents, have them tell us what they want to pay for, and then we'll send out an RFP for the design build.
And those numbers is what you're looking for, right, Brian?
Yeah, we'd need, once we get those feasibility numbers back, we'd be able to, I could coordinate with
Plug 'em in.
Ellers and, or, plug them in and.
And look at what the,
Yeah, and
We'll
it
have a better
basically
idea
do
of
the same,
financing.
the same thing I just showed you, but just
Right.
with little more detailed numbers or more filtered, whatever you call it,
Right.
or examined.
Right, sounds like we have a plan.
You guys have that all written down so we can have a second?
I second it.
Who seconded it? Okay, it's moved and seconded. Yes.
Right, before you take a vote, just for clarification, I know you're saying no phasing, right? So when you say 2030, you're looking for constructing a plant that involves no phasing in a,
Correct.
Future.
I want to know what the total cost is in 2030 from the decisions we made today to 2030.
just wanted to clarify, thank you.
Yeah.
Madam Mayor,
Yes?
I don't know if this will change your motion or vote, but everyone's using the term design build. Mr. Weiss inserted an important word in there,
Yes, he
bid.
did.
There is going to have to be a bid in this process. I know you're not there yet.
Oh, yeah, design.
But there is going to have to be a bid. I
Yeah.
just want everyone to understand.
Okay, I stand corrected, design bid build.
Okay, any other comments or questions? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 And those opposed? The motion will go on 5-0. Do we have any time frame for this as to when we would start? And I'm assuming you're starting right away, but we'd have a report or something in a month or so.
We'll,
You'll let
as
us-
staff develops RFP, we'll communicate with you as to the timeframe involved. And it's gonna take us a week or two to, probably at least a good week to draft an RFP. There's obviously samples out there that other
Sure.
cities have used that we'll use and create and massage it in a way that fits our needs. And then we'll usually need to allow for a few weeks for responses from engineers. So I mean, we're a month, at least 4 to 6 weeks out.
I think you could probably get it done in a month.
A month, 4 weeks out.
Okay.
That would be the goal, right? Get it back then, they can, engineers can respond quickly, right?
If they want work, yes.
We gotta get the super engineers on board.
Okay, I'm going back to the agenda again. Did we skip over land? Is there a reason for that?
I think, Madam Mayor, in terms of, I mean, I don't know that we can have a land discussion, but we certainly have an SRO discussion later.
So we should, table this out somewhere else?
I think it's tough to talk about the land issue because based on the motion just taken, we're
We
gonna
don't
be
know where it's gonna
exploring
be.
2 sites versus central system, and I think that will impact
Okay.
land.
All right, and, okay, so then I think we are ready to adjourn and then come back again at 7. Well, it might be 7 now, but.
Motion
So
to
I'll adjourn this meeting. Thank you, council. Staff.